Good morning, David.
Good morning. It seems a very early start after a late night. David, please don't misconstrue that kind of comment. We were in Salisbury at Diocese and Synod, weren't we?
We were.
And we didn't get back to my drive until 11 o'clock, and then you had to go home. So did our dear colleague Philip had to drive to Bridport.
Yeah, and it was lovely. I mean, it really was lovely to see people and to worship together and to share the Eucharist. It was the beginning of the triennium. So Diocesan Synod sits for 3 years. So it was the first meeting of that new 3-year cohort. And there were new people there and it was all very good. But as I said on Facebook this morning, 6 hours, 124 miles. Is it worth it? Tricky.
That could be an essay we could get our curate to write for us.
What, is it worth it generally?
Well, no,
yeah. Life.
I think it's a very difficult question to answer because I think for those who were there, particularly for the first one, to see people new members and whatever, that's good. Not that I got to know many of the new members except one. And with the difficult subjects online at the moment, which are mainly financial and staffing issues potentially for the future because of the financial hit taken by COVID, etc.
Yeah.
I think those are issues you sometimes need to see the colour of people's eyes in debate.
You do. I mean, yeah.
I agree with you. I think other things that can be discussed online, and I think they will be.
No, it is not. It's so difficult, isn't it? I mean, it's fascinating. There was this revolution of working from home for so many people, not everybody, because some people's jobs can never be done from home. And we always have to be really careful when we start talking about this, because, if you work in a supermarket, you can't work from home. If you're a nurse, you can't work from home. If you look after horses for a living, you can't work from home. But, there is, I don't know, technology is good and there's a definite place for it. And, yeah, gathering people is an interesting thing.
I think less of it will take place in future in that sense. I think there'll be a new part of that new ways of working.
Yeah, but then of course, on a local level, on a micro level, we have been back open for Walking Wednesday a couple of weeks now, and that's just been great to have people back in the building, back chatting, back building relationships, back just generally in the space is lovely, isn't it? So,
it is, and worship together has been very nice and very very positive, and lots of people have enjoyed being able to come back. And it's this great thing about having to sing hymns that whilst I enjoy it, and being an ex-chorister, it's one of the great things I've ever done. But too many people, I think, lost too much sleep over whether we're going to sing hymns next Sunday or not, so to speak. You got a little bit about it, but we're back singing hymns. Don't worry.
It's all good.
We won't subject you to that this early in the morning.
However, we're not back in church again together, having done our filming last week in the same space. We're back on Zoom because it's easier.
It is.
I know that we'll be both in shot, although we did manage to get us both in shot. There was a little bit of framing going on by the media editor.
It was very, very good.
Trying to flatter us, I think he was.
He was extremely excellent in his choice of picture as well.
No, I didn't like the picture last week.
Yeah.
It was being a schoolgirl, that's been the high point for me.
It was rather different for me personally, but there we are. It's all good, and of course, the good Reverend Grasky is still enjoying his expensive holiday. It seems
things are getting better. He's gone down under £4 a pint now.
Yes, he was very pleased with what he thinks is an acceptable price of £3.40 for a pint. I mean, I still think that's,
It's weird because I remember when I was a student, you could still get £1 a pint. It probably wasn't quite the same quality.
watered down, I would think. But by the 15th pint, I guess you didn't notice much.
No one was that fussy, no. To be honest.
I do know that you can still do that in some of our major towns and cities, around student union bars. I think you can still get
do £1 a pint.
Yeah, I think so.
Surely it must be £2 a pint by now. But anyway, those are heady memories for me.
I'll inquire with my daughter, see she not that she's at university, but she's in that kind of business. She may be able to tell me. It's probably £1 a pint and £27 for the pizza with it. Something like that, not quite sure. So there we are. So apart from your drinking habits, which obviously we don't need to go into any more of, we'll drop that. So there we are. So Mr. Grass won't be back next week either. No,
we're going to do a pre-record because David will be on holiday next week and Chris isn't back in time. Honestly, you'd think they'd plan it better, but no. So I would have been left on my own, which can't happen, obviously. So
you're very good at talking to yourself, I'm sure, but we don't want you to have to test that on the screen. So,
well, as I keep saying, I think we should have Harry on, but he's not.
Well, I don't think you're going to do that. I don't think he's going to go. He's
I think he'll ever do it. Nah.
Yeah. Perhaps we can get him in on the Christmas production. He can play the dog. No, not the donkey. Herod. No, that's not Harry. No, I'm getting play Herod.
That's you.
He can run on with a sheep in his arm.
Excellent. I'll tell him to prepare.
Or he could do a bit like what was that program with the dummy, the puppy go? Just a stick could come on and poke one of us. It could be him from the side in the jump. Yeah.
Right. Enough of this waffle. Let's get on with it. Let's have our pause.
Have a pause.
So we're continuing through James because we promised we would, although I don't think what we're going to discuss is going to be particularly from James. But let's hear what James has to say today. This is from James chapter 3 and then into chapter 4. Who is wise and understanding among you? Show by your good life that your works are done with gentleness born of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not be boastful and false to the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, devilish. For where there is envy and selfish ambition, there will be disorder and wickedness of every kind. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without a trace of partiality or hypocrisy. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace for those who make peace. These conflicts and disputes among you, where do they come from? Do they not come from your cravings that are at war within you? You want something and do not have it, so you commit murder. And you covet something and cannot obtain it, so you engage in disputes and conflicts. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask wrongly, in order to spend what you get on your pleasures. Submit yourself, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. So, some wise words there from James again.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question. It's a question that's often been asked about our leadership team, who is wise and understanding among you. I mean, I think our people have sussed this by now. So
it's you. It's you. You have noodles of wisdom.
The question has been asked many times, and because it's then let down by your good life that your works are done. That's a bit not potential there. Done with gentleness and born of wisdom.
It's a challenge, isn't this?
It is. It really is.
I was discussing with a colleague last night. A number of us are submitting ourselves to be elected to Bishop's Council. And what was really interesting was that we both said to each other, oh, well, if you want to stand, I'll stand down to avoid an election. But then it turned out that there were not just two of us, there were more. So we agreed that it would be fine. We'd go for an election and it wouldn't matter who won because we were quite pleased for each other. But
I am looking forward to the hustings for this election myself.
So there wasn't too much selfish ambition or envy going on last night, but and no disorder or wickedness of any kind, I don't think.
I would hope not. I would hope not. Knowing the particular candidates, I think they wouldn't have that kind of part of their lives.
But it is hard, isn't it? I mean, we're about to engage in some talking around the Living in Love and Faith document, which is all about identity, sexuality, relationships, and marriage in the Church of England. There we go. Excellent. Snap. And that's a tough thing to talk about.
It is.
Without there being
conflicts and disputes.
Conflicts and disputes, absolutely. Really tough. And to do it in a gentle, wise, peacemaking kind of way is going to be a real challenge for all of us involved. So we need that wisdom. We need the gift of the Holy Spirit to be able to do that well, I think.
Yeah. I think you're right. Absolutely. I think the whole of these conversations that we're having, there's a lot of conversations going on at the moment. That is just one of them. That's a national church issue. And because we're a democratic organisation, it's come down to the local, and we will discuss it, and then we'll send it back up through the various whatevers as part of discussion going on. And I think that's interesting because if you look at the more local discussions we're having, the local discussions that we're having, of course, are about generosity in many ways. There is a great issue, dear viewer, you see, in the Church of England, and it is not missing or absent even in the Beaminster Team, and certainly not in the Diocese of Salisbury. That issue being that we're bankrupt almost. We're not. The Beaminster Team certainly isn't bankrupt, but the Diocese is having a real problem because parishes are struggling, particularly some of our smaller and tiny rural parishes and poorer parishes, because despite the feeling that Dorset and Wiltshire are extremely rich areas, there are some very poor areas of both of those counties that struggle with issues, and we know them. Here we have our own food bank. You wouldn't think that of Beaminster, but we do.
And we it's busier than ever at the moment.
Yeah, we have issues over travel into school and the costs of travelling to school. We have issues of course, hidden poverty, particularly in the agricultural and rural community.
And huge problems about housing at the moment in our locality.
We do. And on top of that, of course, we're being asked to consider how we help with the present worldwide situation of helping to house those that are being brought in because they have a right, and quite rightly, we can't turn away from that ourselves. We've got to look at it. So there's all kinds of problems. One of the problems is, of course, finances, and how we keep the present structure going, and how we employ people like Joe and myself, because we are the costly element of the church. It's like any other big business, and that's part of my background in business studies. Did lots of study on how you keep costs down, and we all know that the biggest cost of any organisation is its staff, however precious you may think they are, and
or not,
or not, as the case may be from the beginning of that reading in James. Where does it come from? And so we're having to confront, in a way which I think has got to be done gently, without accusation, how do we try to look at this situation? So we're in the middle of it. We're not in the middle. We're on the second week this week of a 4-week teaching and preaching road, to speak, under the auspices of a thing called generous giving, and that's it. Thank you, Joe. Generous giving. And this week we're going to be talking in our service, which is why I think it's key we try and look at it as a wider thing about God's generosity to us, and how do we respond to God's generosity to us by being generous back in return. And it's not just about money, because there's many ways of being generous, aren't there?
Well, and many organisations to whom we might want to be generous, particularly if we have received generous love and care from them. I think, you know, a lot of people, when they've perhaps had a loved one who's been poorly, or they've experienced a particular challenge in their life, often they've been beneficiaries of people's generosity, and then afterwards they want to reward that. But yeah, God is very generous. We're entering that harvest season with our schools at the moment, and just thinking about God's generosity, his abundance, how much he's given us, the glory of creation, the glory of the food growing in the field, the glory of having time and space together to be freely educated. I mean, that perhaps doesn't resonate with your average 7-year-old, but for those of us who are mindful of what's going on in Afghanistan at the moment, to see boys and girls gathered in school is a reminder of something we shouldn't take for granted, that we have that freedom and generosity to be educated.
It's also about what impact does that generosity have on our lives as well, and how do we respond? I don't want to say in kind, but that's really what I perhaps mean. How do we respond likewise to God? Yeah. And how important is it that we are able to uphold a structure which we would call the church, which you can call it what you like, that allows in society that kind of response to those in need. James's letter 2 weeks ago was saying, you know, and I preached on the fact that it's, you know, it's a letter to a church like ours. We love the rich, we love the clean and the whatever, we love those who are nice and whatever, but we tend to ignore those who are poor, dirty, hungry, if we're not careful. And that's what James was saying very early on. You can't do this. God's love for us shows that we should be giving that love back in response.
And if we just reflect on the work of the week that we and our colleagues in churches have been engaged in, you know, just this week in the Beaminster Team, we've fed the hungry. We have prayed for the sick. We have welcomed people who are lonely. We have listened to people's stories. We have supported people in practical ways. We have encouraged people spiritually. We've enjoyed hospitality at Walking Wednesday. We have shared the good news with 450 primary school children. That's just over the last 3 or 4 days.
It is, no. And
what's happened in the life of the team?
And that's vital for us to see. And I think it's good. It'll be good. It's good for us. And what I should be encouraging people to do is, in fact, all of us who are preaching on Sunday, hopefully, will be encouraging people to do, is to take time in their daily life just to reflect on some of that, and where they've seen generosity being given, or when they've witnessed generosity for themselves, and now you can share that kind of message. Is it of God? I believe it's of God. Some people say you don't have to be a Christian to be good. You can do that, and I would agree. I'd agree absolutely. But I think if you are a Christian, it is a gospel imperative that you're showing this generosity back, and also it's a Christian imperative. People are always a bit hesitant. Clergy are always a bit hesitant about talking about giving extra money, because it's almost like saying, you need to pay us because we've got to continue, and it can be a bit awkward. I don't have that unease, because it's not just about keeping us fed, it's about allowing an organisation that is prepared to stand up for these values to continue to do so.
Absolutely.
And if you want that opportunity to be part of an organisation or a faith that is prepared to stand up and confront the issues of that we've been speaking about, it does have to be paid for. It's no different to any organisation, any other organisation. I see this a small chain of shops have closed down after only been open for 2 weeks because of lack of funding, and they're blaming all kinds of things. Probably bad organisation, but I don't know. but if you can only have what you're prepared to support and give, and I think we've got to be, as a church, we've got to be able to say, we need generosity in finance as well as in gifts and time and talent and skills being given to all the things, because actually all the things you mentioned didn't really cost in that direct, nobody had to pay for our advice or our listening or our praying or, the fellowship and the generosity we've given. But there is an overall cost, which has to be met in some ways.
Well, and those things couldn't happen unless there were people available to facilitate them. And then if I was still earning my living as a teacher, I couldn't have been in 4 primary schools this week, and I couldn't have been hosting Walking Wednesday, and I couldn't have been praying with people in the middle of the day. I could have squeezed in some of that around our jobs, and we did. And that was, that's what a lot of people have to do. And we also have, that calling to be disciples 24/7, whether we're engaged in full-time ministry or full-time work somewhere else. So it's not that it can't happen, but if you want that resource available all the time, then it does come at a cost. And also, I should point out, it's tricky. It's always hard talking about money and all that kind of stuff. But all the clergy, the clergy I know well enough to talk about these things with, they give to the church. So that's our discipleship. That's our commitment as Christians. Even though we receive benefits from others' generosity, we also give our money to the church as well, because we believe that that's important. So it's not something that we're preaching about in a vacuum. It's about how we choose to live as well.
I think part of the thing perhaps we can all do this week, as part of this theme of generosity, is perhaps keep a note of any stories of generosity that we see, and that's well worth doing, and thinking about it, and look out for situations perhaps where generosity is needed. And you'll bump into those, I'm sure, not only on the news or in the papers, but in your daily life. It could be the person who we see sat in the street, some would say begging, but if you're homeless, they've got no much option really, but to sit and hope somebody will give you something. You could keep a journal or a scrapbook, well worth doing. I might go back to my journal and just make some notes about that. But more importantly, at the end of all this, and at the end of each day, and at the end of the week, pray about it. Hand it back to God, because his response may surprise us beyond measure.
And as James reminds us in that reading we heard, draw near to God, and he will draw near to you.
To you, absolutely. Thank you, dear viewer of Rev Chat. Thank you, dear viewer of the service on the recorded service we send out each week. Be good to know how many of you watching it, and what your thoughts are. And there we are. Have we achieved both? I hope our Director of Communications thinks we have.
Excellent. You can find us online in the normal places at Beaminster Team and beaminsterteamchurches.org, and Colmers and Eggardon Benefice again on Facebook and their website. We'll see you again next week. Dave and I are pre-recording for next week, and then Chris Grask will be back with us the week after. See you very soon. Bye.